Hello and welcome to this special presentation exclusively for members and donors of the Hoover Presidential Foundation. I'm Brad Reiners, Director of Communications for the Foundation. As you know, this past year has been a tumultuous one on a variety of levels, yet you continued to show your support of the Hoover campus by maintaining your membership and gifts with the Hoover Presidential Foundation. For that, we offer our sincere thanks and gratitude. To thank you for your support, we welcome you to this special virtual program featuring Allan Hoover III called Reimagining the Future, the Hoover Presidential Library and Museum. Allan will discuss the history behind the building of the Presidential Library and how it has evolved over the years and what lies ahead. We invite you to submit questions for Allan throughout the presentation by using the event's Q&A feature you'll find along the edge of your screen. Allan Hoover III is a great-grandson of Herbert Hoover. Allan grew up in Sacramento, California, and received a Bachelor of Science degree in Civil Engineering from UC Berkeley. He and his wife, Michelle, have 3 children and live in a suburb of Denver, Colorado. Allan has worked on engineering projects all across the country. He also serves on boards related to the Herbert Hoover legacy. Allan also enjoys golf, surfing, and traveling. However, of these 3 activities, he's only skilled at traveling. Before we meet Allan, I'd like to show you this clip of the Herbert Hoover Presidential Library and Museum dedication from August 10th, 1962. Let's take a look.
Within these libraries are thrilling records of supreme action by the American people, their devotion and sacrifice to their ideal. Santa Anna rightly said, "Those who do not remember their past are condemned to relive it again." Now, these institutions are the repositories of such experience, and they are to be had hot off the griddle. In these records, there are, no doubt, many unfavorable remarks made by our political opponents, as well as the expressions of appreciation and affection by our friends. We may hope that future students will rely upon our friends for consultation. In any event, when students become sleepy, they may be awakened by the lightning flashes of American political humor in these archives.
Hello, my name is Allan Hoover, great-grandson of Herbert Hoover, and I am delighted to be here with you today to discuss the reimagining of the future, the Herbert Hoover Presidential Library and Museum. Now, we just witnessed great-granddad's last public address on October 10th, 1962, which was the grand opening and dedication of his Presidential Library Museum in West Branch. And I thought it would be a great idea to start this discussion by referring to the past and the ideals and the purposes that great-granddad had hoped for this Presidential Library and Museum. Today, we will discuss an exciting new project to renovate this library and museum that we hope will invigorate a new generation of Americans to learn from the past. In particular, to learn from the past of this Iowa native son, Herbert Hoover, and Iowa's native daughter from Waterloo, Lou Henry Hoover. All of this to help fulfill the mission of the Hoover Presidential Foundation to enhance the understanding of him as president and humanitarian. This is a project which I believe great-granddad would enthusiastically approve of. Well, he's not here, so why is that? Well, I think the video we just witnessed helps answer that question. He believed that we must continually look to the past and learn from the past so as not to make those mistakes again in the future, and couldn't think of a better place than the Herbert Hoover Presidential Library Museum for that to happen. And remaking this library is an important step in continuing to dynamically accomplish this goal. Well, now, before I begin, I would like to share a couple of stories, some that tend to pop up from time to time, some more often than others. And it tends to come up, one question comes up in particular quite a bit when I am giving speeches at Rotaries or other Hoover events or conversation over dinner. And that question is, do you remember how old you were when you first learned that Herbert Hoover was your great-grandfather? And so today, I thought this story would be a fun one to share because I have a picture of that moment when that happened. So here is a picture. Here is a picture, which I hope is what is on your screen. Here's a picture of my great-grandfather outside the Waldorf Astoria. And there I am to the right of him with my sports coat and as the 70s style was, the big collar. Of course, Granddad was very well dressed. He always was, as you can see in this picture. And so to rewind probably about an hour or two, actually that morning of that picture, I was at my grandparents' home in Connecticut, and I was with my grandmother and grandfather. I was in town by myself. That was something that each of us got to do once. We would go visit Grandma and Grandpa for a week. And this year happened to be my turn. So we were at the breakfast table, and Grandma said to my grandfather, she called him Dad. She said, "Dad, what do you think about meeting at the Waldorf Astoria for lunch today?" Of course, Granddad said, "Yes, that would be terrific." So later on, Grandma and I went down. We went to the Waldorf Astoria, walked in the front door to go to the restaurant, and the most unusual thing happened. Everybody said, "Hello, Mrs. Hoover. Good to see you, Mrs. Hoover. It's been so long to see you. And who is this with you?" And she would say, "Oh, it's Master Hoover." And I was amazed. Nobody had ever called me Master before. I was just an 8-year-old kid. So then we go down, sit down, of course, the whole same thing over and over. Staff coming up saying, "Great to see you, Mrs. Hoover." And then Granddad showed up all over again. "Mr. Hoover, so great to see you. It's been so long. We're so happy you're here." And all the same over and over again. And I was sitting there thinking, what in the heck is going on? Who are they? These are my grandparents. Is there something I don't understand here? And so then we had lunch, and then Grandma again turned to Granddad, and she said, "Dad, don't you think we should show little Al 31A?" And he said, "Yeah, that would be a fine idea." So we finished lunch. We go over to the elevator. They remove this velvet rope so that we can go through. And then there is a man who operates the elevator. And again, the same greetings. "Hello, Mr. Hoover. Hello, Mrs. Hoover. So great to see you." And so then we get on the elevator, we go upstairs, and there is 31A. Now, somebody was living there, so we couldn't walk in, but we looked at it, and I guess my grandmother recognized the look on my face, because as a boy, I was looking at a door with a placard that said 31A with no real understanding or context. So then Grandma turned to Granddad and said, "Dad, don't you think we should show little Al the plaque out front?" So then he says, "Yes, that would be a terrific idea." So then we go downstairs, and that's where this picture came to be. We're downstairs, and the plaque is to the left of Granddad in this picture, and it is facing the street. And so I read the plaque, and it said, "The New York of Presidents, Herbert Hoover, the 31st President of the United States." And then it all made sense. Like, oh my gosh, your dad was the president. And it just hit me like a ton of bricks. And so then I looked at my grandmother and I said, "Grandma, this is amazing. Can I take a picture of this plaque? Because my friends will never believe me at school." So she was very kind and she let me use her camera. And so I took a picture of the plaque. Let me see if I can get that. Here, there is. So you get what you pay for. I was the photographer, an 8-year-old kid, taking this picture, not the best light, but you can make out Waldorf Astoria. sort of on the top. And if you look really hard, you can see Herbert Hoover in the middle of the plaque. So maybe there was something going on. The reason why I couldn't read this in this picture very well, we'll get to that in a moment. But here's what the plaque actually says, and it's still there. Well, last time I saw it was about 15 years ago. Those in New York could probably say if it's still there or not. But there is the plaque, New York of Presidents, Herbert Hoover, and then of course his birth date and the date that he passed, and his list of accomplishments, and the fact that he lived in the Waldorf Astoria for 30 years preceding his death. So Granddad goes to his office, gets back to work. Grandmom and I, and we go back to her house in Connecticut. And I am just amazed. I'm floored. Can't believe this. Can't wait to tell my friends. And so then I get home and, I share all this great news with Mom and Dad. Can you believe this, Mom and Dad? And so then they sit me down, and here's a picture of, well, maybe this is the conversation, maybe not. And Mom introduces me to the other facet of this. And she talks to me about the importance of keeping a low profile. So this was a really memorable week because it was the realization of what the Hoover name is, of great-granddad being a president, but also the responsibility in carrying out that name and trying to honor that and carry out our forebears' wishes as best as possible. So the other story that I would like to share is whenever I'm in Iowa, I always think about another famous Iowan, and that is Ding Darling. Now, many of you may know Ding Darling. He was a celebrated cartoonist for the Des Moines Register many years ago, and he won 2 Pulitzer Prizes while working for them. And he was also really good friends with Herbert Hoover. Well, when Hoover was president, he thought, wouldn't it be a great idea to have Ding come join us at Camp Rapidan, which was his retreat while he was president from the White House. It wasn't far away. It was in Virginia, Shenandoah National Forest. And so Ding met him there. And after a while, they decided to go for a horseback ride. So they went for a horseback ride. And one of them, I'm not sure who, but one of them had this great idea. Gosh, why don't we try to ditch the Secret Service? And so they did. They galloped off. The Secret Service couldn't keep up or lost, something happened. And so anyways, they lost them. Then they thought, well, wouldn't this be a lot of fun if we go to the Ranger Tower and watch the Secret Service try to find us? So they did. They climbed up to the top of the watchtower and they watched the Secret Service frantically trying to find their President of the United States and his good friend. So I thought that's always a lot of fun to think about Ding and great-granddad. And while the Secret Service, maybe they're still searching for Hoover. I don't know, probably not by now. But I would like to spend a little bit of time today discussing Iowa's native son and my great-grandfather, Herbert Hoover. And I'd also like to discuss an important legacy of his accomplishment, and that is the Herbert Hoover Presidential Library and Museum. The Hoover Library Museum is one of 13 National Archives and Record Administration's presidential library, and of course is Iowa's only presidential library and museum. Now, if you don't mind, if you could open up your question and answer box, it's located at the bottom of your screen, and feel free to enter your answers in the question and answer box. And I would like to just kind of see who in this audience has ever been to the Hoover Presidential Library Museum in West Branch. Just add a comment really quick. Okay, great. All right, excellent. Wonderful. Lots and lots of people. Well, let me ask one more question. And when was the last time you visited the Herbert Hoover Presidential Library Museum? You don't have to be specific. You can just say the year, or you can say, whichever year it was. We don't have to get too specific. Let's see what we have. Great, lots of recent ones. Terrific. Well, for those of you who have not had a chance, well, first, for those of you who had a chance, you know it's a terrific tribute to Iowa's only president and our 31st president. But for those of you who have not had a chance to visit the Hoover Library Museum, it is a hidden gem in plain sight in Iowa. It's just located just minutes off of Interstate 80, exit 254 in West Branch, and it's just a gem waiting to be explored. The Library Museum is in the middle of a 180-acre national park, one of only 2 national parks in the state of Iowa. And the best part of the national park is to stand up at the gravesite and look down the hill. If you haven't done this before, for those of you who have, you know how special this is. You stand at the edge of the gravesite, so you look down the hill and through a corridor of trees. And through that corridor of trees, at the end of that corridor, you see great-granddad's birthplace cottage. And it is a great message that he really wanted to ensure that Americans, Iowans, and everybody who visited saw, was that a person from humble beginnings such as his could go on to accomplish such great things in life, such as his humanitarian efforts and his long record of public service to the United States and to the world. It's just an inspiring sight, a small, humble 2-bedroom cottage that housed 5 people. And not far from that cottage is a replica of his father's blacksmith shop. And his father's blacksmith shop, if you ever have the chance to visit, or you will visit in the future, I hope you do, a funny story comes to mind about that blacksmith shop. That is truly an Iowan story. When great-granddad was a young boy, his father was working as a blacksmith. And he said, great-granddad went and visited his father while he was working in the shop, just like many young boys want to do. What's dad up to? So he went into the blacksmith shop, and his boys, sometimes they have a mind of their own. If you have boys, you really understand this. And so he walked in without shoes on, and he got a little too close to where dad was working, and he stepped on a very hot coal. Well, besides the fact that it probably hurt like hell, it left a mark on his foot that was there for the rest of his life. And he affectionately called it his brand of Iowa, or his mark of Iowa. And that mark of Iowa was with him every step of the way when he was a Stanford undergraduate, through his mining career in Australia, in China, and all over the world. During his humanitarian efforts, it was with him when he helped save 6 million Belgians from starvation. And then, of course, the World War I efforts, when he was food administrator for Europe, saving many lives. Also, as a participant at the Paris Peace Conference, his days as Secretary of Commerce, and of course, when he was in the White House and he walked the halls of the Capitol and the White House, that mark was always with him. And then all the way through his post-presidential years and until his death, when he returned to Iowa in October of 1964. So perhaps just as impressive, one thing to look back on great-granddad's life was not only was he president himself, but he also served under 5 other US presidents. Great-granddad, during all those years, was always looking ways to be innovative and embrace new technologies. During his years as Commerce Secretary and President, he was the first person to appear on a broadcast of experimental television. Imagine that today. We're just doing it right now and how easy this is. He also organized an air traffic system to aid aviation. Additionally, he was also the first to use a teleprompter. And who else but Herbert Hoover had the foresight to see the importance of water management along the Colorado River. As Secretary of Commerce under Harding and Coolidge, he brought California, Nevada, Arizona, Utah, New Mexico, Colorado, and Wyoming, all states that had water rights to the Colorado River. He brought them all together to agree on the Colorado River Compact, which gave us the Hoover Dam and all the benefits of a hydroelectric power dam. And just that dam alone of the entire compact now provides water to 18 million customers and sells power generated by its turbines to nearly 2 million customers in Nevada, California, and Arizona. Today, there are 15 dams on the Colorado River that provide recreation as well as hydroelectric power and water to many metropolitan areas across the West. Now, this just touches on the surface of what you would find at the museum. Here's a photo of great-granddad on that same day, August 10th, 1962, on the day of the grand opening and the dedication. He was there with his friend Harry Truman as they opened the library and walked through the front doors. And then here's a picture of what the library looked like shortly after that dedication. It serves as a depository of his presidential and Secretary of Commerce papers and artifacts from friends and foes alike, as he said in his video earlier. The museum has been expanded 3 times since then. The last in 1992 when Ronald Reagan came and rededicated the Library Museum, and it is still the smallest by far of the 13 NARA presidential libraries and museums. But as great-granddad said, if his library is anything like the federal government, it will grow larger over time. And he was right. It did grow during its 30 years of existence. And back in 1992, the library was transformed and visitation reached record levels. Many Iowans and Americans learned and were inspired by the Hoover story in a modern way. Since then, the methods for presenting a captivating, immersive visitor experience have changed dramatically. 28 years ago, think of this to think of how much has changed since 1992. Back in 1992, we made a portable telephone call on a bag phone, perhaps the size of your computer or the size of your suitcase. And perhaps you were on that phone as you were driving to Blockbuster Video. If you were around then, you remember Blockbuster Video? That was perhaps you're going to get the brand new release of the Arnold Schwarzenegger film, Total Recall. Well, today, we just simply pull out our iPhone and we can watch hundreds of thousands, countless of shows and movies and all kinds of media just on our phone with a click of a button. And by the way, there's no rewind fees when you have your iPhone today. Also 28 years ago, Microsoft launched the revolutionary Windows 3.0. Windows 3.0 allowed you to run more than one program at once. But of course, those of you that ran it, you knew that you couldn't run more than 2 or 3 or your computer crashed. And then the other revolutionary item that came out of Windows 3.0 was this guy, the mouse. You can now use a mouse with your computer to operate it. Think of the changes that have happened since then. As an example, here we are speaking with you all across the country. I'm here in Colorado. It's being transmitted from West Branch, Iowa, to all parts of the country, to wherever you are today. And it's just all just like that. A lot has changed since 1992. And so here we are in 2021, and the museum is showing its age. The nearly 60-year-old Hoover Museum, with its last renovation almost 30 years ago, has lettering falling off the stories of the post-presidency years. Flat screen televisions replaced broken tube TVs years ago, yet they don't fit in the cutouts correctly. Interactive exhibits with parts from 30 years ago cannot be repaired because those parts are no longer remade. Well, it is time to update the museum. And I'd like to share with you why we are all so excited about this renovation. We were fortunate that last year, BRC Imaginative Arts from Burbank, California, completed a concept design, and I wanted to share some of their really exciting images with you today. Now, this first picture really isn't very exciting, but I would just like to show you just the general idea of the layout of the library. This is the layout of what it looks like now, and the basic idea of what they're thinking about what the galleries will look like. And the thing I'd only like to point out in this picture is you'll walk in the entrance, have the opportunity to see a movie titled 31, which is like a movie trailer to kind of entice you to learn more about great-granddad and great-grandma. And then after the movie, you can go to this hub, which I have my cursor over. And from that hub, you can go to different parts of the galleries, however you choose. You can either see his early life or you can see his later life. So this slide probably is a little bit easier, not quite of an eye chart, a little bit easier to see of how it will actually work. You would come in from the welcoming, you would come into that hub, and then you can choose to go out to any one of these spokes, however it suits you. Now, if you want to do it in chronological order, you can. You can come up here and see chapter 1 and 2 of his life. His life of adventure is what it's titled. Or if you prefer, you could go straight to chapter 3 through chapter 7, which is his years as a humanitarian with the Belgian Relief Fund, all the way to his passing and his years of hope. And so I'd like to show some of these to you to give you a better idea of what some of the images are possible for what BRC is helping us put together. Now, these images may not be exactly what will happen, but are some of the ideas that they are presenting to us. So this image is in chapter 2. Here's a circle over the area of where something like this could be. And this would be a recreation of a mine, perhaps the mine, Sons of Gwalia mine in Australia, where he cut his teeth as a mining engineer. And it could have stories of his different mining experiences all across the world, whether it was in Malaysia, in Russia, in China. This would talk a lot about some of those early years as a mining engineer, and have some of the stories about how he was a doctor of sick minds and a real immersive experience of what it would be like to be in a mine, perhaps like he was. And maybe the sounds in the background of a drill cutting through rock, and maybe some rock falling and different sounds that could make it a really immersive experience. Another photo, moving on to his years where he was really globetrotting around the world. This idea is the possibility of a train station where each window represents a different place around the world that he visited as a doctor of sick minds. For example, could be a storyboard of Russia at ticket window number 3, or possibly about China in ticket window number 2. And so it's kind of again, another interesting and immersive way to describe the story, a way that is much more like 2021 than 1992. Here is another possibility, a recreation of the Red House. The Red House was where Lou Henry and Herbert Hoover lived in London. And this would be could be kind of a recreation of that house, as that was kind of the center of all their activities and that they did. It's kind of the landing point of all of their trips around the world. And in this mock-up of the Red House above the fireplace could be what you see there, kind of a mirror, which would really be a video of stories of what they experienced during those years. And then on to the presidency. This one is very exciting because the idea is it would be an oval room, and not necessarily a replica of the Oval Office, but it would be an oval room that would begin, say, with these blue colors, again, the immersive experience, where it's intended to create an emotional tie for all of the experience, for all of the visitors. And in this case, it would start off great-granddad's presidency with his ideals and his hopes for the American people to increase their standard of living. And then it could transform to the Wall Street crash. Same room, different colors, different experience going on around, and how perhaps those hopes were dashed. And then after the Wall Street crash in 1929 in October, all of that was changed to where it became managing and trying to help get the country out of the Great Depression. And so I hope this part really describes how immersive and how exciting and how new and refreshing we hope that the renovation will be to engage Americans. And I just wanted to show this last piece because after he passes in 1964, the story would continue on with this gallery talking about his hopes for the future. Again, kind of another area where you can kind of go pick and choose areas of his hopes for the future. For example, if you're interested in the Hoover Institution, which he considered his greatest accomplishment in his lifetime, you could go to that gallery and learn a little bit more about that. Or perhaps if you're interested in his public works projects that he was involved with, such as the Hoover Dam, there could be an exhibit on that in the St. Lawrence Seaway project that was a vital component of his time while he was Secretary of Commerce and his time with aviation, the FAA creation. The final gallery, another gallery there is 100 Million Lives Saved, which could be kind of a summary of all of the relief efforts, the many, many relief efforts that he did on behalf of the American people throughout his lifetime. So I wanted to share this with you because I just thought that BRC has done just a terrific job and wanted to share that with you to see what we've seen and share some of this enthusiasm with the future that we see for the library and the museum. You know, I can remember as a boy visiting the library and museum, and there were glass cases everywhere, a great big open space with cases with different memorabilia and papers and that sort of thing. And then in 1992, the Hoover Presidential Foundation, called the HHPLA back then, along with Hoover director Richard Norton Smith, led an effort to make the museum new again. And I remember the first time I visited the library after that renovation, I remember I felt that all of the glass cases were gone, and I felt I was transported into Herb and Lou's life as you walk through the galleries and walk through their life. And so that was terrific for 1992. But I think what I have just shown you is perfect for 2022, 2023, and beyond. As we hope it creates a new feeling of wonderment and inspiration so the world can learn about these great Americans. And for the Hoover Presidential Foundation, this is our dream, and it is time for this dream to become reality. Well, fortunately, we have a dedicated board of trustees that are looking towards the future. Late last year, BRC Imaginative Arts completed their concept design, which I have just shared some of that with you today. You may have also seen some of their work at the Lincoln Presidential Library in Springfield, which is absolutely terrific. And if you haven't visited it, I encourage you all to do so. It's really amazing. Well, we are very early in the process, but the goal is to have an updated, interactive, and immersive museum exhibit to engage all visitors about Herbert and Lou Henry Hoover. And just like 1992, the museum can be made new again, with new generations seeing the museum for the first time, some seeing it again with a new experience. Young people of Iowa can be inspired to become the next leader to help millions of Americans from a devastating flood like the one great-granddad organized in 1927. Or perhaps your son or daughter could go to West Branch and seek to be the first person to organize famine relief efforts to save tens of millions of lives, like was done in World War I and World War II. Or even simply, as great-granddad said at the very beginning of our discussion here today, just to learn from history so we're not condemned to repeat it. Not only will we be seeking funds from the private sector for the renovation, but the Hoover Presidential Foundation also has been working with the state government of Iowa. You may have seen or heard about a legislative bill that has been introduced in the Iowa legislature called the Hoover Tax Credit. It is a one-time request of the state of Iowa, which is mirrored after the Endow Iowa Tax Credit. It is a one-time, it would be a 25% credit on your Iowa taxes if you choose to support and donate the Hoover Presidential Museum renovation project. We still have to raise the money, but with the 25% incentives for Iowans to donate, we have been we would like to make this an Iowa project that all Iowans, everybody involved, can be proud of. So far, many legislators, including Representative Bobby Kaufman and Senator Zach Walz, as well as the critical leadership of Governor Kim Reynolds, are increasingly leading this bill through the government so that this can be a reality. And we are very grateful for their help and their support. I can't stress this enough. We can't take anything for granted. This bill is vital to the success of this effort, and we need to make sure this crosses the finish line. For my friends in Iowa, If you can do just one thing today, please contact your state representative and your state senator, letting them know that you support this bill and you support the reimagination or the recreation of the Herbert Hoover Library Presidential Museum in West Branch. Believe me, after visiting with some of these folks, all it takes is just a few letters to each representative around the state, and it will make all the difference. And if you can, we would be extremely grateful for your efforts, as it is the simple thing that everybody can do to help get this bill across the finish line. And lastly, I would just like to reiterate that we are all grateful at the Hoover Presidential Foundation, the family, and everybody involved with this project, that we are so grateful for the people of Iowa, for both houses of the legislature, and Governor Kim Reynolds for helping this project become one closer to reality. Now, the fact is, great-granddad could have put his presidential library anywhere, but he felt a strong pull towards placing it where his life began, in West Branch. He always viewed West Branch through the eyes of a child, where he had many fond memories of growing up before being orphaned at the age of 10 and going off to Oregon to live with his uncle. It is Iowa that was the beginning of a remarkable story. It is here where Americans can also be inspired to create their own uncommon story. Our goal would be to have a grand rededication for the Herbert Hoover Presidential Library Museum by August 10th, 2024, which coincidentally would be great-granddad's 150th birthday. Of course, we need your help in achieving this goal, and we can't do this without you, our loyal Hoover supporters who believe in what he and Lou Henry Hoover did in their lifetimes and what they stood for. And because of that, I would like to close with a short clip of the chief giving a speech in West Branch about his beliefs in the American people.
One of his most endearing moments came when he visited his birthplace in West Branch, Iowa, and he delivered his inspiring message, An American Creed.
America is a land of self-respect, and self-respect is born alone of free men and free women. It is these moral and spiritual qualities in free men which fulfill the meaning and the dream of the word American. And with them will come centuries of further greatness to our country.
Well, thank you for that presentation, Alan. That's a lot of great information. And we are open for questions from the audience. Anybody would like to use that Q&A feature that you used before, please go ahead and type in those questions and we'll get right to those. So while we're waiting for those, you mentioned the 25% tax credit. You recently went to the Capitol and met with many of those legislators and the governor. How do you feel about that meeting that you had there, and any stories from the people you met while you were at the Capitol?
Well, it was it was amazing, and it was very humbling to see the support. We spent 2 days there. The first day we spent with House and Senate legislatures, and we met with probably 24 different every position, both sides of the aisle, majority leaders, minority leaders. We met with the Speaker of the House, and every one of them were so enthusiastic about this bill, about this project, about their native son, Herbert Hoover. We were in the Speaker of the House. We met with him to talk to him about this project. And as we walked out, we noticed there was a grand portrait of Herbert Hoover walking out. So that was certainly, I thought, a positive sign, as well as when we met with the governor again in her office is another very large portrait of Herbert Hoover. And also Lieutenant Governor Adam Gregg, he had a bust of Herbert Hoover in his office. And, it's just so humbling to see how they still revere this great American so many years after his death. And, we feel very confident. The governor is completely committed to helping get this tax bill across. And every legislature we met with felt the same. We gave some statements at the House subcommittee meeting, which it was unanimously passed through. Same at the Senate subcommittee later that day. Again, a unanimous support, and it was passed on. And my last understanding was the House Ways and Means Committee, passed the bill 41-2. So it seems like there's really good support, and we're hopeful of its passage. But again, we can't take anything for granted. And to kind of give you an idea of how important this is we think we need to raise about $23 to $25 million for this project when you add everything all together. And the Hoover Tax Credit basically represents about 20 million of that $25 million. And the way it works is if for all Iowans, if they're used to the Endow Iowa Tax Credit, the Endow Iowa Tax Credit is $6 million in tax credits, which at that same 25% you mentioned, Brad, is leveraged to $24 million in funds raised. And those credits and those funds are raised this past year was accomplished in 1 month by the end of January. And in past years, when I did a little research on their website, they've actually had wait lists for people to use this tax credit in future years. So our period of time, the bill that is being led by Governor Reynolds is $5 million in tax credits, which is leveraged to $20 million in funds raised. And we have a 3-year window to get that done. So I think just recognizing how successful the Endow Iowa program is leads us to be, with the way things are going, it's looking very good with this bill. But this gives us a great shot to reach our goals sooner than later.
Well, it's certainly an exciting opportunity, and to see the support that's coming from the state from that. And then you have, it's not necessarily just for big donors. I understand there's, it depends on what the final bill looks like, but there's wording in there so that donors of all different levels will be able to participate. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Well, Brad, you probably know a little bit more about that than I, but yes, I'm glad you brought up that point. There is provisions for certain portion of the funds to be reserved for people donating under a certain threshold. I can't remember precisely, Brad, what was it, under $10,000, I think there was, to ensure that all Iowans can participate or have the opportunity to, because at the end of the day, we really want this to be an Iowan project, along with help from others outside of the state. But the thing that I've come to learn and realize and now really appreciate is how supportive the people of Iowa have been through all of this. And so we're really looking forward to getting started on this.
Mm-hmm. And it's a neat way to involve all walks of life from Iowa to get that benefit of that tax break too. Linda and Nathan Hopkins are with us today, and they'd like to know, is the federal government doing anything to support this project?
That's a terrific question. And let me just provide a little bit of the history of that. So when the original library was opened, all of the documents and such were donated. And I believe the building and the construction of it was all donated to the federal government, and in a letter in 1960 in exchange for, at that time, the General Services Administration's agreement to operate and maintain the library. I am not familiar. There were some renovations in 70, 71, around that period. And then, of course, the renovation in 1992, which I understand that the foundation covered the cost of the galleries, and NARA, now it's National Archives Record Administration, who is a part of GSA, they took care of all the building upgrades. For example, NARA, they'll have new conditions, new requirements, and so NARA had agreed at that time to do that. But that was also done with the help of Senator Mark Hatfield at the time, who was a tremendous champion of Herbert Hoover. And he was able to get an earmark attached to a bill that enabled the funding of about $7 or $8 million to take care of those building upgrades. And so the foundation took care of the rest, and the funds were raised, and the museum was renovated by 1992. So today we expect something similar to that. We have received quotes from BRC Imaginative Arts of what the galleries would cost. So we know that piece of the pie. Shive Hattery has been hired to determine what all the building upgrades would be. And that is being priced up. We hope to get that price here sometime in the next month. And then that would be the starting point where we would go visit with NARA. Now we have the family and a couple of members of the Board of Trustees met with the National Archivist just to give him an update here recently in order to help facilitate NARA's participation. And since, just like 1992, we have recently learned that earmarks are back we learned that from the National Archivist. So that was really great news. And because of that, we have a meeting with Senator Grassley here next week to give him an update and to just kind of let him know of what our thoughts are and what our hopes are of participation from NARA. But you know, there's a lot of work to be done there. We're just getting started, and we're really excited. And the archivist, he's very excited when we shared with him what was going on. And also I have a feeling that Senator Grassley will also too. And then we also hope to reach out to Senator Ernst shortly and other members of the Iowa delegation. But to answer the question, that was kind of the long way to get there, but we do hope that, we do anticipate NARA will chip in for the building upgrades, particularly the ones because of code changes and things like that due to NARA regulations.
Mm-hmm. Super. Now the museum as it stands today tells an immersive story that really draws you in and gets you, close and personal with Herbert Hoover and the things that he's done. But as you mentioned, it's doing it with technology that's 30 years old. So there's not a lot of high technology in this current exhibit. MJ's asking, will there be upgrade, what kind of upgraded technologies can we see? She's asking, will there be things like holograms in the new exhibit?
Okay, well, that is a great question. Let me see if I can go back to, here we go. Let me share my screen. Right there. Okay, can you see my screen okay? Should be the Oval Office, the
Yes.
possible Oval Office exhibit.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a possibility. Now, again, it's all conceptual. Nothing is nailed down, but this could be an example of where you look behind the desk, you see in the back of the picture, that could be a hologram. That something like that. And I think also the thing I am really excited about is this idea of an immersive experience that you could see, with the mine in the earlier picture and this one. The idea is to really get the visitor to draw on an emotional connection. And for those of you who have been to the Lincoln Library, I remember going through and definitely some of the ups and downs, just emotionally going through. And the thought is when you have that emotional connection, then you tend to remember the story. You remember what you've learned much better had you not had that emotional connection. And so the holograms and the other things to try to make it immersive that's where BRC comes in guiding us to do that. Because at the end of the day, this is all about educating Americans about Herbert Hoover and Lou Henry Hoover and their accomplishments in life and what we can learn from that. And that emotional piece that comes with some of this technology is really important. Now, on the other hand, we have to be careful not to go too crazy with technology because it has to be updated. It has to be maintained in case something breaks. Now, of course, 30 years from now, or 30 years ago, we had new technology that now we can't replace some of it because it's too old. And so there's a balance of having really good technology, but also having it so that you can maintain it for the next 10 or 15 years. so that we, when it comes time for the next renovation, it's not completely obsolete. It's still relevant, right? But not obsolete yet, but still relevant. So when we get to the next renovation, we can come in with the new stuff. We don't want anything to be obsolete within 5 years. That would be a problem, and it would be very costly. So we're trying to be very mindful of that balance. And
now, you'd also just mentioned that we're telling the story of, it's really both Herbert and Lou Henry Hoover.
yeah,
Today's exhibit talks about Lou Henry Hoover, but in a very small way. There's a few places in there where we get to look at her, and she was such an amazing force of her own. How will the new exhibit deal with Lou Henry as an individual?
well, that's a great point. The existing exhibit, it's terrific. It's really fantastic.
Mhm.
But unfortunately, like you mentioned, Lou Henry gets lost because the comment cards we've seen, as many people have passed the Camp Rapidan exhibit, where it really explores Lou Henry's life. And so in this case, Lou Henry is going to be woven into the fabric. The intention is throughout the exhibits and not just at a certain spot, because she was such an influential person in his life. Just as an example, the Agricola Dera Metallica. Lou Henry was fluent in many languages. She could speak it, she could write it. She had a real gift for language. And so they came across this book called Agricola Dera Metallica, which was a book of old mining practices. But the problem was it was written in a form of Latin that was mostly lost. There were terms in the book that the author made up because there was no other way to describe these practices or this maneuver or how things were done. And so great granddad had the fortune of knowing a little bit about mining, and great grandmother knew all kinds about language. She knew Latin. And so the two of them, as a labor of love, worked on it on steamships, in Red House in London, all sorts of places for a number of years, working to translate that text. And eventually they were successful. They did. And, it was a really important book that was translated, so much so that she and great granddad won I don't remember the exact name of the award, but they won a medal from the Metallurgical Society for their work on that. And also she's had some really amazing other accomplishments in her life. She was the first person to graduate with a science degree from Stanford many years ago. She was, the story that always comes to mind is when they were in Tientien during the Boxer Rebellion, and they were in the middle of a siege that lasted about a month before the Marines saved them. Well, she was the one sweeping the bullets off the porch of the hotel they were staying at and feeding the people in the compound and making sure they were cared for. Also, when she was later on as First Lady, she was honorary president of the Girl Scouts, but she took it very seriously, ultimately became the actual president of the Girl Scouts later on. And she was the person that came up with the idea of the Girl Scout cookies as a fundraiser for the Girl Scouts, which still around today, thanks to her great idea of girls baking Girl Scout cookies and selling them. Now it's a little bit different, but the idea is still there. But, and that's just, again, that's just touching the surface of her accomplishments. There's many, many more that will be explored in the new renovated library, and it'll be incorporated in the fabric of great granddad's life throughout the museum and not just in one place. So we're really looking forward to that, and we're excited about that as well.
Sure. Iowans and people from West Branch especially, take great pride in having the presidential library here, and that he selected it here. He only lived here for 9 years, and then was a man of the world, did great things all over the world. Could have put his presidential library really anywhere. Maybe Stanford, was near and dear to his heart as well. But he'd always, he'd return to West Branch. And why is it that you think he chose West Branch for his library and his final resting place?
Well, I think it's uniquely American. I think, a couple of things come to mind. First is his birthplace cottage. That was something that my great grandmother helped organize in the 40s and perhaps even earlier, was to buy the birthplace cottage and have that kind of as a memorial, because it's such an American story of humble beginnings, of somebody with a desire to make a difference going on in the world, and from a small town in Iowa. And we have lots and lots of small towns across the country, many people from small towns across the country, and it's a very inspiring way for Americans to step up and participate and volunteer to do things to better their neighbors and their friends' lives, or in his case, people across an ocean that he never even knew, to help them with their standard of living with some of the relief efforts that he led on behalf of the American people. And also, I think, so that's one part. The second part, I think, is later in his later years, when you see videos like the one that we showed at the end today, there were huge crowds of people that showed up. And, I mentioned the mark of an Iowan that he had, that he carried with him throughout his life. And I think when he came back for special events in his later years in life, when he came back for rededication, he came back for birthday parties, there were always huge throngs of Iowans that came to pay respect to him. And I think that really touched him. Just my opinion. I don't know this for a fact, but I think that really left an impression on him of why it was so important that the library and museum be in West Branch. And when he passed, there was an incredible showing of support. And of course, the family saw that, was participating in that. And, things like that are very humbling to see the support of somebody who worked hard to help improve the betterment of people around the world. And I think that connection really rings true. And I think it still rings true today from what we evidenced at the State House and legislature a couple of weeks ago.
Well, Allan, I really appreciate you spending this afternoon with us today and sharing your family stories with us and the photos and all. It was a great presentation, and we thank you so much for your time today.
Well, thank you. And by the way, I just saw in the chat box, Margaret Hoover said that the plaque of the Waldorf Astoria is still there. So
Okay.
again, there is another touch point for great granddad in the world that is still going strong.
That's super. So with that, we'll conclude this program with a reminder to register for 2 more interesting virtual programs this month. March is Women's History Month, and our next 2 programs will honor Lou Henry Hoover. Our regular third Thursday program is next, and that's going to be on March 18th at 6 p.m. Central Time. And that features author and historian Annette Dunlop, who will present A Woman of Achievement, Stories from the Life of Lou Henry Hoover. Now, on Lou's birthday, which is March 29th, Herbert Hoover's great-granddaughter, Leslie Hoover Lauble, will present Lou Henry Hoover, A Life of Adventure, with Hoover archivist Spencer Howard. They've been cataloging some rare family photos to share, and we'll discuss Lou's life from childhood up to her time as our nation's first lady. These programs are ones you don't want to miss. So visit the events tab on our website at hooverpresidentialfoundation.org and get yourself registered. Even if you can't attend, register anyway, and we'll send you a link to the recorded program. So again, on behalf of the Hoover Presidential Foundation, we thank Allan for his presentation, and especially you for your continued support of events and programs here at the Hoover campus.